Good morning, everyone. I am State Representative Sedrick Denson, and this is Lunch with Your Legislators. Want to thank you all for joining us today. We have quite the important topic to talk about today. We're going to be talking about education. I hope everyone is home, staying safe, taking care of yourself and your families through these difficult times. Today, we're switching gears a little bit and just really focusing on one topic because, as we all know, education is always a priority in making sure our children in Ohio are taken care of. And in these unprecedented times, we are seeing some things that we've never seen before. So that means that we are going to have to legislate our way through some things. We are going to have to make some adjustments in our homes, and we're just going to have to do things differently. So today we can have an open conversation with some experts about what all of that looks like, and an opportunity for you to weigh in and ask some questions so we can know exactly what we're doing and be on the same page and share that information with our family and friends to make sure that everyone knows what's going on in the state of Ohio. So I am not going to belabor the time. We're going to move on. I want to toss it over to my colleagues who are going to give you some brief updates about some different things going on. So I want to introduce now Representative Katherine Ingram.
Representative Denson, I appreciate being here, of course, and I too am going to keep it brief because we've got a lot of things to do. And of course, this portion that we're talking about today, education, is so broad, and of course we'll get to higher ed. So I want folks to know that we have not considered that there is a continuum, and some of the things that are happening at pre-K-12 actually transition right into our higher education. So we'll be talking about that at a later date. Just got off the phone. Everything is so crazy. Just got off the phone with the folks with with home and fair housing and gender equity. They have a series of conversations that they are having too. And one of the things that we all need to address is when the moratorium on evictions is up, what does that look like? So I'm hoping that while we're transitioning and thinking about what people are going to be doing, is that we also are looking at things that the legislature has done and that will be coming to an end shortly. And it's going to impact some of these people who got a call just late last night about somebody who still has not gotten in to apply for unemployment. And so anyway, there's lots of things going. The new round of the PPP swears that it's going to get to some of those smaller businesses. So hopefully we'll be able to talk about that too at some other time. But today I'm just going to pass it on. So thanks you folks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rep. Ingram, and I am going to share my screen very quickly as I'm going to talk about some free at-home learning resources for all of the wonderful parents out there, and even for some teachers who would like to access these. But there are a number of things that were shared with us as legislators, so I want to make sure that we share these with you. First of all, Scholastic Magazine, there's some links here, and I know you can probably barely see these because the font is small, but please contact my office. My email will be in the chat box, and we can send these directly to anyone interested. So Scholastic, Khan Academy. What I really wanted to talk about is the Ohio At-Home Learning Initiative, which, if you've been watching the governor's press conferences, he has mentioned this a few times, that there are available learning for all ages on all Ohio PBS television stations across the state. So tune in for those as well, for the parents at home trying to keep up with the education for our kids. And then of course there are some state resources, learning resources at coronavirus.ohio.gov, and then /learn-at-home. That is also for all ages, pre-K through 12. And then the last thing I wanted to mention today before we get started for our wonderful presenters is Charter Communications, better known as Spectrum, has extended their public access to Wi-Fi hotspots through the 30th of June. This was going to end in May, but now they have extended it. And if you would like more information on that, we can send that to you as well. They're doing a lot of great things for folks heading into college this semester as well. So we will gladly send that information to you if you reach out to my office for that. And with that, I will kick it over to Rep. Kelly.
Thank you so much, Rep. Miranda. And maybe you can attach that file in the chat because I don't think, I'm not sure it's shared properly. My name is Brigid Kelly. I represent the 31st District. We're really glad to have so many folks with us today. It's May 1st. It's May Day, International Workers' Day. So also want to just say thank you to all of the folks who are out there continuing to serve our community in a really difficult and challenging time. We really appreciate all of the work that you're doing, whether you're a first responder, healthcare worker, a city worker, grocery worker, you name it. Thank you. Want to just clarify a little bit of guidance that folks may have seen from the governor's office regarding face masks. I have mine here prepared. Of course, it's green. But really want to encourage folks, when you're going out in public and you are with other folks, continue to observe social distancing, but also please consider wearing a facial covering. There are a lot of circumstances where you might have to be close to people. This is a protection for all of us. And if we all continue to do small things, we can make a big difference. It's a courteous thing to do. It's something that will help to keep us all safe. So please wear those facial coverings when you're going out in public. One other thing we want to remind people of is we know this is a challenging time for a lot of folks, and the Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services Department has resources for people for whom this might be particularly challenging. So you can text the Ohio Crisis Text Line for the number 4 HOPE to 741-741. Again, the Ohio Crisis Text Line is 4 HOPE to 741-741, or you can reach them at 877-275-6364, 877-275-6364 for additional resources in your community. And with that, I'll give it back over to Rep. Denson.
Can you hear me?
All right. Yep.
Sorry about that. Thank you all so much. So again, like I said, we've got a very good topic today with some very good speakers who are going to lay out some great information so we will know how to prepare ourselves for these tough times we're getting ready to go through, but also making sure that we're getting the best quality education to our kids. So I want to thank you all again for being here. And you can join in on the chat at the bottom of the screen if you're joining by Zoom to put some questions in there. You also can, if you're watching by Facebook, add some questions there, and we will make sure we're monitoring everything to get those questions answered appropriately as we move through today. So I'm going to turn it over to Rep. Miranda, who will introduce our panel today for our discussion on education. Rep. Miranda.
Thank you, Rep. Denson, and I apologize. I thought my screen was sharing earlier, but apparently it wasn't. So I shared the free learning resources in the chat box for everyone on the Zoom call today, and we will make sure that's available. Maybe we can throw that slide back up at the end after our wonderful presenters. So I have the honor today of introducing our presenters that we have with us. First, we have Melissa Cropper, who is the president of the Ohio Federation of Teachers and the secretary-treasurer of the Ohio AFL-CIO, which represents 20,000 members in 55 locals across the state, including public school educators and support staff, higher ed faculty, and public employees. She was a library media specialist in Georgetown, Ohio, and president of the Georgetown Federation of Teachers, and she has been serving as the OFT president since being elected in 2012. Melissa and her staff are crucial allies to the work we do at the State House, and we are happy to have you here with us today. Second, we have Scott DiMauro, who is the president of the Ohio Education Association. OEA represents more than 122,000 teachers, faculty members, and support professionals who work in Ohio schools, colleges, and universities. Mr. DiMauro has a 28-year career as an educator, specifically a social studies teacher from Worthington, and he held the vice presidency of OEA for 6 years prior to being elected its president in 2019. OEA has a wealth of knowledge that we are thrilled to share with our guests on the call today, and for those of you watching live on Facebook. And then last but certainly not least, we all recognize how important our superintendents are to each of Ohio's 610 school districts. They make the critical work of running a school district look easy. So we have Dr. Dave Axner, the Deputy Executive Director of BASA, which stands for the Buckeye Association of School Administrators, more commonly known as the Association for All of Ohio's Amazing Superintendents. He is a former superintendent himself from Dublin City Schools. And then joining him also, we have Dr. Kevin Miller from BASA. He's been a public educator for 36 years, with 16 of those years as a superintendent. Last August, he assumed his new role as the Director of Governmental Relations for BASA. So we want to thank all of you so very much for being here with us, and for the folks that you brought with you today from your organizations. Melissa will be up first, then Scott will be second, and then Dave, you can take it away after that. You each have 5 to 7 minutes to present and speak about what it has been like during this COVID-19 crisis and the impact it has had on education and your organizations. And then we will open it up after Dave's presentation for Q&A for panel style for all of our presenters today. And the Q&A will be moderated by Representative Katherine Ingram and I. Both Rep. Ingram and I have served on local school boards, so we will do our best with our gained experience there as board members in keeping our educators on time, so we can try to wrap this up by 11:57. So with that, please take it away, President Cropper. Oh, and please make sure you're unmuted as well.
Thank you, Representative Miranda, and also to Representatives Kelly, Ingram, and Denson for having us on the call today. I think it means a lot to all of us as educators that you see the importance of the role that we play and that you're giving us an opportunity to have a voice. I want to start out, first of all, by reminding people that next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. So this is a very timely conversation. So those of you who are teachers who are on the line right now, I'll say to you early, happy Teacher Appreciation Week. Those of you who are parents educating children at home now, just to remind you, you might want to send out a special thank you to your teachers next week also. This has certainly been, a challenging time for all of us, whether we're educators or parents or students. Is certainly a new situation that we find ourselves in. And our teachers have really stepped up to the plate during this time and being creative in how they connect with students. And even just the fact that they are making every effort that they can to connect with students. I talk with educators daily to try to find out how things are going. And I'm always touched not only by what they are doing to educate kids, but just what they are doing to personally reach out and connect with every single student to find out if the student is safe. Does the parent need any help with anything that's currently going on? Are you dealing with the stress okay? And then doing things like, I talked with a kindergarten teacher yesterday from Crestview over on the western part of the state. She's doing something. She's doing a bedtime story at 7:30 at night, twice a week, with the whole group, with the whole class, so they have a chance to see each other and connect with each other. But then also calling students at least once a week individually to have these kind of conversations. So that's what we have seen our educators doing, is really spending more hours than they typically spend in a normal school year, spending more hours a day trying to educate children, being aware of the fact that parents during this time are also trying to work and help their students, so they might not be available during normal school hours. That might not be when a child is doing their schoolwork now. It might be in the evening. So our teachers have really opened themselves up and working long hours to make sure that students are educated. So really what we're kind of focused on right now is what can we learn from this experience that we can take into the future, because there is so much uncertainty right now, and this uncertainty that's really causing a lot of stress and anxiety for everybody involved. And so we're trying to look ahead to the future. We're putting together some work groups to think about what do we need to do moving forward? What have we learned? And looking at the different scenarios we might face, whether we're back in school or we're not going to be able to go back, or we're doing some kind of blended model. What do we need to take in consideration for that? And so we sent a letter to the governor recently kind of outlining the things that we're going to be looking at. We didn't really give any answers yet, but kind of as a framework, we're saying that we really need to do a deep assessment of what's happened and to figure out, where we stand, what we need, et cetera. We're saying that we need to do this in collaboration. This should not be, the governor deciding what happens, or the legislature by themselves deciding what happens, or one organization deciding what happens. But this is really a time when we all need to come together and share our experiences, whether we're educators, parents, students, community groups. We really need to be coming together and talking about what's happened and how do we move forward. And then we need to have a focus on resources, because we all know that resources are going to be very tight. And I think what we really want to emphasize is that we want to make sure that we don't forfeit our future as we move ahead. The temptation is going to be to talk about what can we cut, which, we know that things are going to be tight, but we really need to be thinking about what do we need. Our students are going to be coming back with more needs than ever. So not only are they going to need their teachers, they're going to need those paraprofessionals who are often the people that they're closest to in some circumstances. They're going to need those bus drivers. We need everybody in the system to be available to provide for the students' education needs and for the stress and emotional needs that they're bringing back to the school system. So we want to make sure that we're talking about that. And we also want to talk about the disparities that have happened, not just within the education system, but throughout the whole system. And how do we address these disparities so that we can have need to have a renewed sense of a national urgency to reimagine what a better Ohio could be and what's that pathway to a better Ohio. And that means investing not just in education, but in health, in social services. How are our children getting fed? Where are they living? And to us, this is really an opportunity to focus in again on this community learning center model that we see working so well in Cincinnati. And how do we look at the resources that are available within organizations and bring all those together in a way that's accessible to everybody, so that we are making the most efficient and effective use of what we have available. And then, as I say, as a final piece here, this is also a time when we know that we have scarce resources, that we need to be looking at this voucher issue again. We know that next year the state is going to, in their budget, they increased from $53 million going to income-based vouchers to $121 million. Is this really a time to be putting money in private education when we know that school district budgets are going to be so strapped and our public school students have such high needs? So, in the Cincinnati area alone, Cincinnati Public Schools is going to lose $28.5 million from their budget. St. Bernard is going to lose $315,000. Hamilton's going to lose $585,000. We can't afford those kind of cuts at this time, so we have to keep this voucher issue on the table and make sure that we're putting resources in the public schools and not allowing them to be drained in other ways. So I will close with that, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, President Cropper. And if we have President DiMauro here, you are more than welcome to go right ahead.
All right, thank you, Representative Miranda, and thanks to everyone for putting this meeting together. Before I get started, I want to introduce my Vice President. Jeff Wensing is a math teacher from the Parma City Schools, and I've asked him to share a little bit about what we've been hearing from our members across the state as they've been experiencing this shutdown. Jeff?
Thank you, Scott. Am I on?
Yes, you're good to go.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name's Jeff Wensing. I'm the Vice President of the Higher Education Association, and around St. Patrick's Day, our educators and our students were told, hey, get your stuff, you're going to go home for a couple of days. And then shortly thereafter, we figured out it was going to be a little bit longer than a couple of days. And our educators said to themselves, hey, we got to figure this thing out. Number one question was, who has access to technology? Who has access to technology? What kind of school district are you working in? Is it a one-to-one school district where all the students have technology, or aren't you? Does everybody have a laptop? If that's not the case, how do we get students technology? And then once we figure that out, how do you make sure everybody has access to Wi-Fi? And when I say everybody, I mean educators included, because we have educators across the state and rural, urban, suburban districts, and in some of those locations, it's difficult to get Wi-Fi. And one of the things that was a challenge for our educators initially was kind of like the Goldilocks effect, I call it. How much work is too much work? Work assigned to students is too little work, and what's just right? And I think we're finding a happy medium, or we're in a good spot when it comes to exactly what is a good amount of work to assign our students. Because not only are we concerned about our everyday education of the students, but we're concerned about their physical and mental health as well. So that's a component moving forward. So in my district, Parma City Schools, where I came from, I taught 26 years. The initial plan was, if you don't have access to technology starting out, before we get you some, we're going to give you an ability to get some hard copies. And they had a schedule, and they had so many requests for hard copies, they had to redo their schedule. So more and more flexibility is coming into play as we figure this thing out as well. I have a friend that teaches in Steubenville, elementary teacher, and one of his concerns right off the bat was, I have 30 students, but in the first couple of weeks, I've only been able to contact 10 students. Where are the other 20? Are we going to send a school resource officer out to their houses and find the students? First of all, where are they? So we're ironing those questions out as well. It's difficult for our educators, as mentioned before by Melissa. It's hard to separate work from home. I think teens get a bad rap, but I think teens like to sleep. So sometimes teens are sleeping till 1, 2, 3 in the afternoon, and they're getting up, and then after they get up, they think about doing their schoolwork, and they're getting on the computer at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and submitting their work at 2, 3 in the morning. So our educators really want to be there for their students. It seems like it's a 24/7 job now that they're working from home, and they have families, and they have their own kids, and they might have school-age children, and they have to help them get their work done as well. So there are challenges for sure, and as educators, we are figuring them out as we go, as we always do. But out of these types of challenges come success stories. Our educators are super scintillating and sensational. We're putting hot spots on school buses, and we're taking the school buses out where the students are. We're making sure with our cafeteria staff, ESPs, as well as volunteers from the community and classroom teachers, are making sure the lunches and breakfasts are prepared, and we're being mobile, and our members are getting those out to the students. Educators are making masks. They're making masks, and they're getting them to first responders. I have had conversations like that, and they're making cards and sending handwritten cards to their students to make them feel safe during this time, and specifically to high school seniors who are feeling shortchanged because of this being their senior year, and our educators are going out of their way to make them feel that they have value in their senior years means something. I've heard of parades in towns. Teachers are in their cars, and they're driving in parades to let students know that they care about them. In fact, I've had one local president from a larger city who was something like that. The police chief called him and said, please don't do that, because we don't have enough support with our local police force, and it will create chaos in our town. You guys are doing a great job planning that, but please don't. So out of these challenges have come success stories, and we're learning and moving forward in these difficult times. So thank you for the opportunity. Scott, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And I think that just kind of illustrates just the real challenges that this whole situation is facing. So Melissa mentioned that it's Teacher Appreciation Week coming up. the NEA, our parent organization, did a poll of parents across the country, and one thing that's pretty clear is that parents do appreciate the work that teachers are doing. 88% of parents feel like their child's teacher is doing a great job, despite all the concerns that they have. And the number one concern as they think about school is that they feel that their kids are really missing out on that socialization. So one thing we know is that remote learning has pointed out that as hard as we work and as creative as we are, there is no substitute for the personal connection that exists between educators and students in the classroom. So I think Melissa did a really good job of laying out, concerns, and we share the same thing. Number one, we have to make sure that as any planning moves forward, that safety is prioritized. Safety for educators, safety for students, safety for people in communities. And that includes things like making sure that everybody has PPE, especially our education support professionals. We need time to plan, to assess what's going on. That includes, I saw a question in the chat box, having good formative assessments so that we can see where our students are so that can guide our planning for next year in terms of learning. We need collaboration. We need to focus on equity. I talked to a colleague who teaches in a wealthy suburban district outside of Cincinnati. He's a high school Spanish teacher. I said, how's it going in terms of connection with your kids? 149 out of 150 of his students have been staying on top and doing a great job. And then you heard what Jeff shared about, experience of another teacher in another community where, more than half of his students are kind of AWOL. And that's something we've got to address. And that's not the kids' fault. That's because of lack of resources in too many places. And then I guess I'll just close by saying what's really essential to echo what Melissa said is we have to have resources at a time of great need. This crisis put a spotlight on massive inequities in our system, and it's made them worse. Right now, we need Congress to step up. We're calling on Congress to put $175 billion into relief for public schools across the state. We hope that everybody who's here today, including our legislators, can join us in advocating for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Scott. And Dr. Axner, you are
Yes.
next.
Thank you, Representative Miranda. And I'm just, we appreciate having the opportunity. Am I okay?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm going to turn it over to here in a minute to Kevin Miller, our governmental relations staff member that does a fantastic job and has hit the deck really running with leaving the superintendency in these times. But just a few things that I would say. And again, with having almost every superintendent being a member and many central office people, there was some scurrying when the schools were closed and it was announced. I think we saw it coming, but maybe not with a whole lot of lead time. But with that, and Scott and Melissa are two perfect examples of, working for the cause and working for the kids. And that's where decisions are going back to, and with what we're trying to figure out and kind of get through this difficult map. What I would tell you is generally the flexibility for the next months, possibly 6 months, possibly a year, to get through that time, knowing education is going to be different. I think it's been an incredible opportunity for people to whether it's maybe shape up and learn the technology that maybe they didn't. I'm amazed. I hear regularly from my own daughter, who's a special education teacher, and what they're doing to make sure our kids are serviced and getting those needs. Has always been mentioned. The assessment piece is one that we're definitely going to have to see where these students are and monthly make sure that we are watching data to see that we get them back on track and understand. The financial aspect also is a piece. But what I would highlight, and then I'll turn over to Kevin, and graduation, that decision in regards to can you do it and you can't was a perfect example of the diversity and inequities that we have. We have districts that have graduating classes well over 500, and we have graduating classes of 32. Our school districts look different. The opportunities are different. The challenges are different. So when legislation is passed, when there are rules and regs that are set for us, the best thing we can do is keep those guardrails wide enough and allow our leaders and our educators to be able to figure it out on the way it'll impact and deal with their district. But again, we appreciate being here today, and let me turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that, and appreciate Melissa, Scott, and everything that you've all shared to this point. And I hope that things work out okay. I've got 4 boys who are actually taking part in distance learning right now, so we're all sharing the internet in the Miller household, and I hope that we don't have any short circuits. But you can see that I've shared the screen, and what I'm going to do over the next 5 minutes is fly through a variety of legislative issues that we at BASA, along with Ohio Association of School Business Officials and the Ohio School Boards Association, have come up with to share with legislators. You can understand there are a myriad of issues that have to be addressed, and House Bill 197 did a really nice job for school districts across the state in addressing many of those issues. But now that we know buildings are closed for the rest of the year, there's a second round of issues that we feel need to be addressed. So I'm going to provide a very, very quick overview, and representatives, please know that glad to spend time with you one-on-one or in your small group, so we spend a little bit more time on this. But just to give you an idea and understanding of issues that need to be addressed, because our underclassmen did not have end-of-course exams, they didn't have the ability to earn credits or their points toward graduation. We're saying that basically if they passed that parallel class, then they should receive that credit or that point toward graduation. An issue with non-renewal of people who were up and eligible for continuing contracts. We have issues with maybe some administrators or teachers who maybe were given a 1-year limited contract, and now the board has to make a decision about giving a continuing contract, but yet we weren't able to appropriately evaluate that individual. So we're saying let's extend that 1-year limited contract 1 more year so that the district is able to really be fair to everybody involved. Storm shelters has nothing to do with COVID-19, but yet there are some issues that we feel need to be addressed right away. We had a moratorium on storm shelters included in the House bill, and a Senate bill was introduced in December to extend that to November 30th of 2022. We would say with the passage of emergency legislation, let's continue to extend that moratorium to November 30th of 2022. Territory transfers, other legislative issue, has nothing to do with the pandemic, but yet it's a terrible piece of legislation that has really provided a free-for-all for district residents to take out a petition for any number of residents to transfer from their district to a contiguous district if they share the same township. And already we see this impacting districts across the state, and districts who are losing those residents have nothing to say about the loss of revenue and the loss of their students. So we would love to see this sunset with the passage of emergency legislation. OTES, because we have no assessments this year, there'll be no value added going into next year. And the only fix would be that districts and teachers have to develop their own student growth measures for next year. And as we've already noted, when our kids come back to school, they're going to be all over the place with the kind of experiences that they've had and the kind of access that they've had to technology and the educational opportunities that we've provided. So we're saying we just really need to put a halt on student growth measures for next year and make that evaluation piece focused on the rubric itself and performance. Third grade reading guarantee, we really appreciate the flexibility given to local principals, teachers, reading teachers to make a decision about whether students ready to move forward to grade 4. We would ask that that provision be extended not only to next school year, but the following school year. And in saying that, I think everybody agrees that when we are able to come back, it's going to take a lot of time for districts and children, teachers and families to kind of find the ground again. And so we appreciate the legislators understanding that, you know, this isn't a 1-year fix, it's a multiple year fix. And because of that, we really have to step back and take a look at the report card implications. We really cannot be basing high stakes decisions like academic distress commissions and ed choice vouchers on the local report card the next few years, if not beyond. as Melissa noted, as the teacher that shared with us noted, our educators are doing incredible things. I mean, at the drop of a hat, they had to change the way they deliver education, and the response across the state has been amazing. But really the challenge is families and equity and their ability to access those opportunities. So we're just saying, folks, we need a lot of time to really get back to even kilter at all with this. And so we appreciate that understanding. Again, nothing to do with COVID-19, but we have some districts that have been incredibly harmed by the devaluation of the power plants or the closure of power plants in their districts to the tune of millions of dollars. So we're looking at a real need to help fill in the gaps for those districts. We all know that we're probably going to take a step back financially in the next fiscal year, but for these districts, it's kind of a double whammy because of their loss of funds and what they've had to do to cut programming and staff because of the devaluation of those power plants. So we would ask the legislators to take a good look at that. And again, just moving forward, challenges for our superintendents, for our districts, for our communities. We don't know what the budget holds for next fiscal year. And right now, they're making personnel decisions. And as Melissa noted, you know, we cannot forfeit our future. We need to, more than ever, provide support for our students and for our teachers and for our communities. CARES funding allocations coming soon. We know that will be helpful. Required payment to employees during a pandemic is a struggle for many of our school districts, and just understanding what school looks like when we start up in the fall. We know that just cannot be defined right now, but again, a lot of questions surrounding that with the reduction of staff, transportation, PPE, how do we account for student attendance, what do we do about required courses, a lot of question marks around there that superintendents are working very hard on, and what they're trying to do is develop solutions to problems that we can't even define yet. So again, legislators, we thank you for your time today, and we're glad to sit down with any of you via a Zoom meeting and spend more time going through each of those issues. This is a growing list. This is a growing list as we realize the problems that are out there that we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller, so much. We appreciate that presentation, and to all three of our amazing, well, actually 5 of our amazing presenters. So thank you for that. We're going to go ahead and start our lightning round of questions here. So I will kick it off with the first question that came in through the folks who registered for this call today. And that question is, will the lives of children be endangered by the reopening of schools in Hamilton County? So if you would talk a little bit about what you're seeing as various different types of educators and administrators in our buildings and what that looks like for the fall.
If I could start with this, our number one priority is to make sure that absolutely is not the case. And there are lots of complex issues that we're talking about, but schools should not be reopened until everyone is confident that it's safe to do that. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about how do you implement social distancing guidelines in schools in a safe manner, but frankly, you know, schools aren't designed, you know, our classes don't have only 6 or 10 kids in them. So I think that we're gonna have to be very cautious. I wanna also just say, in response to what Dr. Axner and Kevin Miller were sharing earlier, they raised a lot of issues that need to be looked at legislatively related to testing and accountability and report card stuff. We need to be looking at all of that, not just as a response to this crisis, but long term. I think this crisis has reminded everybody that we've got a very broken testing system and a broken report card system. And let's take the time to fix that. Let's not go back to those report cards that we know were not very effective in the first place.
And Jessica, I'll just jump in quickly also and say that AFT just released a plan to safely reopen schools. Goes in very much detail about what we think we would need to see in order for it to be safe for students and staff to go back. What it needs to look like in society, and then what it would need to look like in our school buildings. And I think if people could probably just Google that, AFT plan to reopen schools, and it would show you where we stand on that issue.
Well, and let me say this, let me jump in. This is Rep. Ingram. I think we're going to get a lot of that from lots of people. And I haven't seen what you have, but the first and foremost, we want our children to be safe. You will hear the conversation from the administration, even at the federal level, that talks about, well, little kids don't get it. Well, you've got to have teachers in those buildings, and how do they really know? I assure you that they have probably found out things yesterday that they didn't know in March. So we're going to be looking at all of that, and some of those things even that Dr. Miller brought up. The legislature, we're working on some of those things already, and we all know how much pushback we'll get. I'm not sure, because I don't think right now that some of us all agree, but we'll be looking at what the report card does, what all of those kinds of things we're taking into consideration. And it's much bigger. Here, what I call this thing right now, the COVID-19, is actually an opportunity to see what went wrong and what we need to correct.
Thank you, Rep. Ingram. And I'll just go right into the next question. As you can see, we have a plethora of them over here in the chat box. So in no particular order, I'm going to grab one here. This one says, I heard in a different venue that the U.S. Department of Education is giving money to states via the CARES Act. Example, Mississippi is receiving $1.5 billion. Where's our money in Ohio? Would any of our presenters like to address that?
Yeah, I can start. Yes, Ohio is going to receive some CARES Act funding that's targeted to schools. It's nowhere near $1.5 billion. That's one of the reasons why we're really calling on Congress for a new round of relief that is much more focused on providing support to states, to local communities, and to school districts. We're facing projected in the next between now and the end of this budget cycle, what could be a $5.5 billion budget shortfall. Only Congress is in a position right now to provide immediate assistance, and that's why we need to fight for every dollar to make sure that we don't forfeit our future as we think about the needs of our kids.
Yes,
to add to that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
No, go ahead. Okay, Kevin, you're good.
I think districts will be seeing that money in the very near future. I know that Ohio has made the application, and what we've heard from ODE is that allocation for districts will be about 80% of their current Title I allocation. So I'm thinking you'll see that money available in the very near future.
And one of the things I hope that they do, and thinking about doing business and how they will function differently, is rethinking how they're doing business in those schools. Because, and I probably shouldn't say business, because a lot of people say, well, this is education, but you have to think when it comes to those dollars, what are your priorities and what do you really need to do with that? And so that will be interesting when those allocations do come, as to what choices many of the districts will be making.
All right, I'm going to grab another question here. What long-term effect / lessons will the COVID-19 pandemic have on the future of public education in Ohio?
Well, I'll jump in here. I do think this is an opportunity to really assess what we have in our system and what we need. And this has certainly shown the inequities in terms of digital divide, as well as some other issues. And I think this is the opportunity for us to say, how can we better meet the needs of students? What resources do we actually need to meet those needs? I'll go back to what I heard Scott say earlier. I mean, there's nothing that replaces face-to-face with the teacher or the socialization that happens within our school districts. And I think we always want to make sure that we're fighting for that type of public education, where that socialization, connection, relationship building is happening. But we also need to make sure that our teachers have the correct professional development to be able to deliver online instruction when it's called for. I think that we need to look at this digital divide. I would also say this, as I said earlier, this is a prime opportunity to look at this community learning center type model, so that we're looking at the community and as children as in a more holistic way, to say what resources can everybody bring to the table to not only make sure that children are educated, but they're being fed, they have a place to live, they have access to the internet, their health is being taken care of, etc. So now that all these inequities have really been highlighted and that we see all this, shame on everybody if we don't look at how do we correct those disparities and those inequities and provide a better pathway for our students moving forward.
Representative, I'd like to jump in on that one also. You know, and so a perfect example of what Melissa's speaking of, and again, I think Scott mentioned inequities. You know, we don't know what the long-term effects are going to be, which is a little scary. But the good news is, with some of these capabilities and these this remote learning and other options that our teachers and administrators are getting more comfortable with, I think that's going to help, especially if we have to open the buildings, not at capacity, but you know, under a maximum count, or however we do that. And those guidelines are going to be important. But the things that we don't know and the impact, and Eric Gordon was on one of these calls a week ago, and at the time, there were still thousands of students in the Cleveland City district, which he is superintendent, that they had not even been able to contact. So we had districts that, you know, day 2 were online teaching classes, no different than they had been done when those students are sitting in classes. We then had those issues in Cleveland and small rural districts that took weeks to get going. We had superintendents and teachers and administrators going to homes, helping connect hotspots. I mean, there's been some heroes, but still the impact of that leads back to why we're gonna need to walk slow as we enter back and have flexibility. The perfect example that I could give you with that is the teacher evaluation. 4 years, I was on a committee with Odie and others that worked on what I felt were incredible standards. And as that lifted out into our educators, it brought openness and conversations with teachers and administrators, and then we made it punitive. And the day we did that, it changed, and now we're bogged down in those issues versus good PD for those that need it. So anyway, it is scary looking ahead, but we do know life is gonna be very different.
Absolutely. Scott, did you want to jump in before I go to the next question? You good? Okay. All right. And I just wanted to say to everyone watching and listening too, that you can see the high caliber of our presenters today and how much they mean to us. And these are the exact stakeholders that we as legislators listen to each and every day when we're talking about common sense policy for the state of Ohio. So I just want to say really quickly again, before we go into the next question, we're not going to be able to reach each and every one of these questions. We wish we could. We wish we could stay on here for hours with you all, but we're going to try to grab as many questions as we can and go through as many as we can with the amazing folks we have on the line today. Okay, so this one says, how are educators now assessing what students have learned and retained since the closure? How will they determine the starting line for the students when school does reopen?
So I think that's a really important question, and I don't think there is a state level response to that. We know that assessments, the typical state assessments, were suspended this year, so we don't have that test data. Everybody agreed that that was the right decision to make, and a big reason why that was the right decision to make is that there are high stakes decisions that are connected to that. And to David's last point, just as OTES got on the wrong track by making it punitive, our whole testing system is on the wrong track because it's punitive. But I've asked our state superintendent, and I know that the Department of Education, is really thinking about how do we still provide educators with high quality assessments that they can use to see where students are, not from a punitive standpoint at all, but just to kind of know what their level is and what their needs are. so that that can guide planning for next year. That's why we're calling on time to be set aside at the end of this school year. And maybe that means that school districts need to end a little bit earlier than they would have otherwise, to allow teachers to really do some thoughtful, deliberative planning with their administrators to look at all of that information in order to make good decisions for next year.
Right. I would just add to that, because I agree wholeheartedly, but for years, educators have been saying that the most useful information to them is formative assessments. And I think this is what our educators will be relying on largely when we go back in the fall, if we go back, but somehow doing these formative assessments to figure out where the children in their classrooms stand. But in addition to looking at the testing moving forward, I think that moving forward, we're also going to need to look at the standards that are out there. And if we're in some kind of, well, knowing that we're going back with students already having been out of school for a while, and knowing that we're probably going to have a really jumbled year this year in a lot of ways, I think we need to look at how do we slim down those standards a little bit and determine what is the really most important critical things for students to come out of the school year next year, and how do we make sure that we are teaching those particular things and not stressing out about what a state assessment is, but just really focusing in on what students need to learn and how we're going to deliver that, in addition to all the other pieces of education that are important, such as how do we still provide them the opportunity to grow through a band class and a choir class or an art class and all those other pieces that are also important to developing the whole child. So how do we make sure students are getting what they need without overwhelming them by trying to catch up from last year and cramming a whole other year's worth of learning?
I think that what you'll see, this Rep. Ingram, I think what you'll see is that we have the COVID slide that's going to slide right into the summer slide. And then depending on where you get back, you're going to fall right into what could be fall slide for some of these kids. So the assessment and even the evaluation of the teachers is something that, here again, as was noted earlier, unfortunately, we've turned all of this stuff into punitive instead of making sure, excuse me, that we're moving people forward, our teachers forward with their assessment or evaluation, as well as our students. The high-stakes test became a way to penalize school districts, and unfortunately, we were penalizing those kids. I mean, anytime you got a second grader falling out of his chair because he don't know the answers to the test, and that's stupid. That's something that we've unfortunately done, and here created new inequities as we've done that, because there are some school districts that are just fine. Hey, we can get those standards. We have to make sure that what we are measuring within those standards gets us to a better academic outcome for those students. And if it doesn't do that, then we're using it for the wrong thing. We're using the data incorrectly.
Yeah, and if I could just add one more thing quickly, because I heard this on a call the other day and it just really resonated with me. But we have a system that is so geared towards rankings and ratings and how do we compare to the rest of the world, et cetera. And we need to take a step back and remember that the rest of the world is going through this crisis at the same time that we are. We shouldn't be living in fear of we're going to be falling behind the rest of the world. And hopefully when you say, how is education going to change? Hopefully the biggest change that comes is we get away from thinking in terms of rankings and ratings and thinking instead of children, individual children, what does this child need to be successful and how am I going to help each child get there, instead of looking at this overall ranking system.
I would agree with what you said, Melissa and Scott, that what you did in 197 was you provided flexibility and trust for educators in issues such as graduation and third grade reading guarantee. And so we would encourage you to continue to provide that flexibility and trust in local professionals and the fact that they know their students better than any legislator ever could. And I think you have to take a good hard look at the testing program. And I think we would all agree that there is valuable information that is gained from our state testing assessment program. But the most important assessments are those formative assessments that we do locally. When we spend over $72 million with our contracts with our testing companies, we're going to have to ask ourselves, do we want to spend that, or would we rather use that to support our school districts?
I know Representative Miranda, you're probably getting ready to wrap up, but just one final thought is, you know, perhaps for as horrible as this whole experience has been, maybe it has indeed, as was said earlier, provided us an opportunity to really assess what matters most. We know that we've had to focus on the social and emotional needs of our kids. We need to focus on safety. We need to focus on equity, which is about meeting everybody where they are and addressing their needs. And really identifying what are those aspects of policy that really get in the way of us being able to serve the needs of our students. So to all of you legislators, thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate everybody being engaged in this conversation. I think this is just the start of the conversation. This is not just a response to COVID. This is what do we believe about the future of education in this state.
Thank you. Perfect segue, Scott. I appreciate that. I was going to try to hit you all with one more question, but we are running out of time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time who has been joining us for the past 3 Fridays now. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here, for all you do each and every single day for our students and our staff. And at this time, I will kick it over to Rep. Denson as he closes us out here. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, Rep. Miranda, and thanks again to all of our panelists today. As you can see, there's a lot going on and a lot we need to be paying attention to. I know that some of you probably still had questions that you didn't get to answer or maybe sent in and didn't answer to, so continue to send those and we will be following up to make sure you get the information you need. Just want to give a quick announcement that next week we are shifting gears a little bit. We are going to do lunch with labor, which will be on next Friday at 11 a.m. So join us for a special town hall on reopening America, and that's with our friends with the Cincinnati AFL-CIO. So we are going to take a quick pause and join in with our partners who help us get so much great work done at the State House to have a very, again, important discussion as we're going through this time. I want to thank you again so much for joining us today, and stay tuned. We'll be sending out a new flyer with all of our links to register for the rest of these that we do to connect with you. So thanks again. Thanks to our panelists, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.